Can we get some confirmation online that you all can hear us all right?
I can hear you and see it.
Perfect. Great. Thank you. Appreciate that. So for anyone that may have called in remotely that's on a phone number, we'll need to capture that phone number at some point. So we'll track that down here at some point today. But welcome. Great to have you all here. I know a lot of things going on right before the holiday, so appreciate taking the time to visit with us. We got a very full agenda, so I don't want to waste too much time. I want to get into it so we can get through the topics that we want to get through today. I think the more important thing is to share out that, and John, I don't know if you've got a slide on this, but the local work group process is going to be starting here in mid-January. And so I would encourage everyone to pay attention to the local work group process when it's going to be in your district. They're posted on the website or in our NRCS website, I believe last night. So I would encourage folks to try to participate in at least one of your local work group meetings that's coming up here starting mid-January through March. So I don't know if Don will get into other.
You don't have too much elaboration on it other than this.
Okay. Very good. So that's exciting news. That's going to be happening here soon. So with that, again, welcome. Thanks for you all joining us. And we're going to get right into the agenda. And first up, we have FSA program updates. So we'll have John get the presentation on here.
Yeah,
I think so.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, great.
That new display is.
Okay. Okay. And then if you want to use a mic, you're welcome to.
That better? Everyone hear me? No? That better?
It doesn't sound
We
like.
can hear you.
Okay. All right, I'm Julie Patzel. I'm a conservation specialist with FSA, and we're just going to go through some updates since our last meeting. This first slide, Jana Ingerson-Laws is the other conservation specialist with me at the state office, and then Patrick Lechner is the chief for the conservation and price support section. Our fiscal year 25 CRP status and overview. So because we are running without a farm bill or without an extension, as of October 1st, FSA cannot process any offers for CRP enrollment on any sign-up type. What that means is county offices will not accept manual or automated offers. We cannot ask NRCS to perform any site visits or develop any conservation plans. We cannot perform any other work to prepare an offer for approval. We cannot approve any new CRP1 contracts for any CRP type, or we cannot approve a CRP contract revision or correction that will result in an increase of CRP1 acres. We cannot approve any forest management incentive contracts or any transition incentive program tip contracts. So we are pretty shut down right now as far as CRP goes. Also, that kind of goes into cost share too, where any contracts that were approved prior to September 30th, we can go ahead and pay those agreements as they come in, but we cannot approve any cost share that is over the originally approved CRP. So Jana and I are having to review the whole state for any contract revisions, divisions, terminations, cost share approvals, cost share payments, to make sure that we do not increase our acres, because that is a violation of the Anti-Deficiency Act set forth, since we do not have an extension or a new farm bill. So this is a brief overview of the active contracts for Nebraska. I just pulled this data last week. So right now in the state, we have a little over 2.4 million acres of CRP enrolled. We have a little over 21,000 contracts in effect, and we issued around $96.5 million in payments this last October. That average rental rate of 40 is kind of misleading, because that includes every sign up, including grasslands, which, as you all know, grasslands doesn't pay near as much as regular CRP. And then this picture in Nebraska, the darker the green, the more acres that are enrolled in that county, which you can tell western Nebraska, there's a lot of grassland acres out there. So that adds up really quick when you're enrolling 500-600 acres compared to a couple acres of a filter strip in eastern Nebraska. And then the chart also has the contract acres by expiration year, and that breaks it down into the sign up. And then also the contract acreage enrolled by sign up. All of these 200 through 206 signups are grassland signups. And you can tell the 300,000 where that's hitting for sign up 205 and 204. We enrolled over 300,000 acres each sign up in CRP. This last sign up 206, we were limited. We had another good sign up, but because of nearing the national acreage limitation for CRP, they didn't accept as many acres nationwide, but Nebraska was one of the 3 highest states for enrollment acres. I'm going to break that down a little bit. The contract acreage, this is, you can tell here by sign up, clear 30, we have 61 contracts, continuous, 196, that's acres, 196,000 acres. CREP is 41,000, farmable wetlands, a little over 2,000. General sign up, which is the sign up, we just had sign up 62. Those are the ones that just run a couple weeks a year. Right now we've got 343,000 acres. And then as you can tell, grasslands is by far the biggest acres we have for Nebraska. And then HEL is your highly erodible initiative. So any offers that have an EI of erodibility index of 20 or greater can enroll automatically in HEL. The contract count, again, that just breaks it down by sign up. Continuous is by far our biggest contract count in Nebraska. So you can see the acres, 1.8 million, but we only have 4,800 grassland contracts. Those contracts are quite large. And then the 40 acre, $40 per acre rental rate. This is for all contracts that are active. So some of these rates could be 10 years old. Some of them are brand new. So the grassland of $16.15 really brings down that average when you look at clear 30 being at 322 or continuous being at 157. And then what we enrolled this year for sign up 61, which was continuous, sign up 62, which was general, and then grasslands 206. Grasslands 206, we enrolled 657 contracts. And as of when I ran this report, we had 210,000 acres under this sign up. Some of those contracts are still under interim plans where because of the large sign up and the time frame, they allowed NRCS till December 15th to develop the conservation plan. And then the producer still had the option to back out if they didn't agree with that plan. So we did have some contracts that didn't move forward after the final conservation plan, but most of them did end up agreeing to that plan and signing it. Our general sign up 62, we only had 122 contracts for a little over 6,000 acres. Our continuous sign up 61, we had 13,300 acres, and then highly erodible, we had 117 for 4,194 acres. For what we have expiring this fiscal year, general sign up, we have close to 34,000 acres with 282 contracts. And then our continuous, we have close to 22,000 acres expiring, 64 highly erodible, a little over 1,000 continuous, and 19 farmable wetland contracts. That's all I have for an update because we are really pretty much at a standstill as far as conservation goes. But are there any questions?
I'm curious, when this cycle hits and you get held up with CRP, how does that actually affect like enrollment or opportunities for landowners? Is it a barrier? Does it hold people back? Or is it just kind of a blip in the process that you run into?
It's a barrier for continuous sign up because normally when we have a farm bill, they can start enrolling October 1st again and enroll those continuous practices, or if we have safe projects or crowd. So it really, it kind of impacts that until they get a new farm bill or an extension, we won't be able to start signups. If they get an extension again, last year when we had an extension, we had to batch all of those offers, and then National decided if we had enough acres to approve so we don't go over that cap. It's CRP runs a lot smoother when we have an actual farm.
Yeah. Any questions from the group online? Virtual group? Any questions in the chat? Whoever's monitoring the chat, anything?
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Julie. Next up, we have the NRCS Conservation Program update with John and a few other program staff that's going to join you.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is John Maverger. I'm Assistant State Conservationist for Programs, and I'll go over programs update for FY25 into. One of the main things that is a player in what we're doing in FY25 is the Inflation Reduction Act. And as you recall, Inflation Reduction Act began in 22. We started putting dollars into contracts in 23 and 24. And we are right now for FY25. The key point with the Inflation Reduction Act is we have to put in a climate smart ag and forestry practice. So there's a list of all the practices we do with NRCS. There's a list of which are core, and then we have ones that are facilitating as well. If we put a facilitating practice that's not part of the core list, it has to directly benefit one of those core practices. And those are to sequester carbon or prevent carbon from entering the atmosphere is the idea behind that. We cannot include IRA funds in a non-IRA contract or vice versa. So those funds are separated. And with the IRA, Inflation Reduction Act, all the practices and activities have to be obligated and implemented and paid on before the end of the 2031 fiscal year. So September 30th of 2031, those funds stop. We don't make any payments beyond that. And so that'll impact how we do our contracting with those. So we can't have contracts like right now, it's 2025. We can't have a 10-year contract because in IRA because they have to be spent by 2031. Now, I should mention also, the Inflation Reduction Act did not add any new programs. They're just added onto our EQIP and CSP programs. So here before you, you'll see a climate smart core practices and facilitating practices list. Each year, there's been some tweaks with it from 23 here through 25. And so some practices come, some go. It depends on how the researchers, periodicals point them out. And so if you notice on this list, last year we had 314, which is brush management, was core. CSAF, Climate Smart Ag and Forestry Practice. It's not a core for 2025, but it is a facilitating activity. I'll show you down here, down below for 520 prescribed grazing. So prescribed grazing is a core Climate Smart Ag and Forestry practice. Brush management is not, but it can facilitate that for 528s. And so just running through this list, there's not too many big changes on here. We did have prescribed grazing last year as a core activity. It's not a core activity anymore, as and brush management isn't, but both of those are facilitating for the prescribed grazing practice. And also, we have some activities on here. Somewhat hard to read. There's little footnotes, if you will, on some of these activities. And what that means is those practices are core climate smart ag and forestry practices if they're implemented a specific way. So not in every case, but they have to be done a specific way for that to count. All right, so again, the list hasn't changed a lot except for those two that I mentioned. And I should mention also, this is a little bonus information, but brush management is a core climate smart and ag and forestry practice if it's implemented where you have less than 13.5 inches of average rainfall. So in the western states, it does count as climate smart, but in Nebraska, it doesn't because we're 14 inches better throughout our state. Okay, so that's what we as field offices, NRCS, we have to pay attention to those as we obligate funds towards that. Now, the EQIP ranking deadlines for our IRA will be the end of January. So we have all of our applications come in by November 15th of this year. That was our sign-up deadline. We will rank those applications for IRA consideration by the end of January. Then the general dollars will have those ranked by the end of February. Okay, and we are going to do this year what we call Act Now for IRA, which means if we have specific practices that are non-undertaking type of practices, meaning those that don't require dirt work or trenching, digging, something that could disturb cultural areas. If they're those type of practices, then folks can sign up for this and we will be able to get them in a contract a lot quicker. So simple ranking, as long as they're above the minimum threshold, and they're signing up for any of these activities that do not require us to have consultations with SHPO or all of them, we have to consult the tribes. But if we don't need those consultations, then we can go ahead and approve those contracts for applications a lot quicker. They can start the work this spring. So we have ones for cropland, ones for grassland as well. And again, these are for non-undertaking types. Yeah.
Hey, John, does like under 372, does the footnote then still have to be on it then as well too? I mean, in terms of being eligible, will it be, or that's just 372, but on the previous page under the practices that had the footnote?
Yeah, it would still apply. The footnote would still apply.
Okay.
And the reason is because 372 is only eligible if it's applied that specific way. Great question. So again, these are just for Act Now, for IRA funded contracts. So we're not doing Act Now for other general contracts. Okay, as I mentioned, our sign-up deadline was November 15th. November 15th to the end or the middle of May. And we will take those IRA applications that are Act Now, the ones that are non-undertakings, and people can apply all the way into the middle of May. And so with Act Now, we take applications first come, first serve. So the earlier somebody applies, the first we consider. As long as what they're applying for is above the minimum threshold, we'll go ahead and obligate those contracts. And we'll do that until the funding is come. We might not go to the middle of May. It depends on how many applications we get in. We utilize all those Act Now funds in February, then it's like, let's see, first come, first serve. So again, with Act Now, once the eligibility is met, we try to get them processed within 10 days. We're going to look at all the applications that come in on a weekly basis and pre-approve and then obligate funds until we run out of funds. Okay, this is a breakdown of what we have for FY25 with the general allocations. And as you can see, we have just under $21 million of general funds. This is not climate smart. This is just our general funds. Of those, we're going to put $500,000 into urban and small scale. We have the wildlife initiative, which is 10% of our total funds. Of course, 700,000 is not 10%, but we also look into the Great Plains Grassland Initiative and Sandhills Working Lands for Wildlife is all part of that. Our Bob White Quail funds. You add all them in together, and that'll be 10% of those our total funds. We also have funds for CPAs, DIAs, and CMAs. Those are our planning type of practices. We have to put in a specific amount of our funds towards historically underserved, which includes limited resource producers, beginning farmers, ranchers, socially disadvantaged. We're mandated to put those funds in for that. $1 million down for APOs, 100,000 for organic, tribal applications, and Hills Working Lands for wildlife. Disaster, we put funds aside from our general allocation in just in case, and this happens almost every year. It seems like we get some wildfires, some flooding, those type of disasters. So it's in the kitty in case those situations come up. Source water protection, $2 million. PIC, it's a type of EQIP that's kind of an EQIP CSP hybrid. Putting funds for that. We have a minimum we have to put in for that. efficient energy, NWQI. We have funds specified for those in our water smart. So when you add those specific funds together, and these are all our statewide pools showing there, that adds up to 13, almost $14 million, which leaves 7 million for our NRD specific pools. So see off to the lower left how the NWQI is distributed between those 4 project areas. And of course, then our other statewide pools that we have to have. Okay, so this is our IRA allocation. I'm not sure if this, oh yeah, this is our NRI allocation. We're still going to have similar percents split between the NRDs, but then these are the statewide funds. We have 38 million, I believe that's correct, for a total IRA. And of, sorry, is this?
I think that might be last year's.
Okay. This,
Sorry.
okay, that's okay. Sorry about that. This does not include everything this year. This is last year. Last year, we had $29 million in EQIP IRA. We have actually $38 million for FY25. So they add $10 million onto that. These slides just didn't get updated, so apologize for that. So $38 million is what we have budgeted to Nebraska for EQIP IRA.
John, what's the roughly distribution to the NRDs?
For the IRA,
Yeah.
I think it was I think we had it down about 50% of that 38 million. But 19 million, I believe, is what we have allocated for the NRDs to divide amongst them. And we divide those funds based on our general allocation percentages. So it's similar, what each NRD gets for general, they'll get the same amount of that.
And what's their obligation to meet the criteria on those funds? Do they go into the same criteria that would as an individual producer to access those in terms of the like a 372? I mean, is there a classification how those funds are distributed?
So it'd be using the IRA criteria,
Okay.
right? So it would be, it's the ranking for the IRA funds. So it'd be on that climate smart and ag forestry list, that type of thing. I don't know if I'm following you.
Well, so does the producer make application to those funds?
Yes.
Okay, through the NRD.
No, through NRCS.
Okay, all right. That's what I was getting at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, and I didn't make that clear.
Yeah, when you mean that you're distributing, okay.
Yeah, no, it's, when we say by NRD, it's by our NRCS administrative NRDs inside the NRCS offices.
I'm sorry, I made that.
Oh, no, that,
So each DC will get a certain percent of that total funds that they use within their offices.
I was just picking on you, John, from our conversation in NWRA at the table there, so.
Okay. Okay, so I'll stop here. Are there any questions on the EQIP side of things?
So you showed that there was $100,000 for Sandhills Working Lands for Wildlife in the general allocation. And there's $200,000 in the IRA. However, that was last year's allocation. So I don't know if the distribution's similar for this year, since it's about double what you had up there for that. If that's last year's number.
This is last year, yeah, it'll be a similar percent, except we're adding $10 million to that starting amount.
Okay.
And
And
so,
so if 314 and is prescribed burning 382,
338?
338, 338. If those two aren't available, the Sand Hills Working Lands for Wildlife IRA allocation doesn't work, does it?
It again can be used as a facilitating practice, but we have to have a 528.
You have to have 528, but it could still be a facilitating practice even though we have more than 14 inches of rainfall. Is that, yeah.
Yes. Yeah, the 528.
And we're using prescribed grazing as the core practice because that's on the core practice list, right?
Okay.
So prescribed grazing, it's a management activity that the producer follows prescribed grazing. But in order to accommodate the prescribed grazing, there's facilitating practices that we need to get the job done. Fencing, pipeline, watering facilities, prescribed burning, brush management, all of those are facilitating practices that go with the prescribed grazing core practice. So we have the core practice, prescribed grazing. These facilitating practices to help get the job done are included in the contract for IRA.
So a correct statement could be made by saying IRA money can still be used in Nebraska for brush management and prescribed grazing through that caveat. Well, that's exciting news. That's not how it's been presented to me or to many. The changes with that determination, there's hearings in place. Is there some hearings going on about the determination for taking away 314 and 338 from IRA, or is that just finalized and done deal?
Well, it's finalized for FY25, but I'm not aware if headquarters, they're doing any hearings at the headquarter level or at the undersecretary level. I'm not aware of those, but as it stands right now, this is the list for FY25. And this is how we are rolling it out for Nebraska, for it to work for us.
And then a question of the allocation amounts, Sand Hills Working Lands for Wildlife, how do you guys make the decisions on your allocations? I'm sure it's tough to figure out how to allocate everything, but was just curious if it's by demand or if it's just by priorities stated or.
Some of it is mandated. You have to spend a certain percent for wildlife related practices. And so within that, we have some discretion on how we want to distribute that. A lot of it is based on historical usage. We have fund pools that don't utilize all the funding, then the next year we'll take a look at that and distribute that perhaps slightly differently. So it's a combination of the two, what's mandated and then what do we think is going to utilize the funds. Yes, great questions. And, along with that, all these other practices on here, which are not climate smart core, all facilitated for prescribed grazing. Really different irrigation type practices and so on.
So I retract. So you guys aren't concerned about the taking off of 314 and 338 from a core practice? Is that a concern for you guys in managing the funds and the projects in the state of Nebraska?
Well, it was when it went from a core activity to not core anymore. But we do have the authority to determine what is facilitating to these other practices. So before, at the very beginning, we thought this is going to be a hit. 338, 314, we used a lot of that last year. And also with some irrigation practices. And we were wondering, how are we going to utilize these funds that we need to use? We can't return them. And, but we do have authority. If this is something we deem is necessary to do a 528 correctly. That helps. It was a concern. Now I think with our understanding, we're better off than we would have been without it.
Last time about you, John, under 442, I noticed in 449, there is a red line update of a requirement in that core of a requirement for a flow meter. Did that go through? Is that finalized?
I have a listing here. See if I can- Okay, the 449, which is irrigation water management.
Yes. Yeah.
Now, and it's got, I should have well, we took it off our list. And the reason why we took it off our list as a core practice is because, and I mentioned those footnotes, it can only be core if it's used as an alternating wetting and drying system in rice.
Rice fields in Nebraska.
There aren't any.
Yeah, you can make some, right?
Wouldn't be too profitable. And so we took it off our list, so we don't even let our field offices or anybody think, well, 449 is a core practice because we don't grow rice here.
Right.
Yeah, and there's other ones similar to that where it's only core if it's in a specific situation. And if we don't have that situation, we don't.
So what is 587? Structure for water control dash flow meter. What do you mean by that?
I wish we had some engineers here. Maybe somebody online, could they tell us what a 587 is?
Yeah, John, I can take that for you if you don't mind.
Yeah, please.
Yeah, 587, the name of the practice is Structure for Water Control. And within that practice, we've got several scenarios that provide everything from a flow meter, an inline flow meter to a well and a pivot system, or stop log structures or box structures that control water levels in like wetland enhancement areas and those types of things. So it's kind of one of those practices that covers all those scenarios. I don't know, did that help?
Just a follow up. What is the flow meter requirement, or what are the parameters of the flow meter itself?
That's a great question, and I'm going to try not to get myself in trouble. But we approve it. It's a lot of what we've done in the past is a micrometer inline prop flow meter. I know there's some other types of flow meters, ultrasound or ultrasonic. I don't know if that's quite the right term, but there's several types that you can use, and I guess that's about all I know, other than we probably should get an answer from an engineer if there's one out there.
Burke, were you asking if 449 requires a flow meter?
Yeah, but I was gonna, if that wasn't the core, I wasn't.
So the
If it's
Yes, it
correct.
does.
587 is facilitating to, of course, the micro irrigation, but it's micro irrigation is what is for practice. We don't cost share just on 587 flow meters using IRA funds.
Gotcha. And mine is really relevant to, there's a lot of talk about measuring everything, and, how are we going to accomplish that as a combination of what you alluded to, whether it's an ultrasonic or whatever the particular process or sensor needs to look like. And that's really what I was after, is if we're going to be asked to continue to do more and more of that at the producer level, what does that look like? And so that's really clarity and just kind of where everybody's headed with it.
Okay, very good. I also don't want to get myself into trouble with.
Sorry, the longer I think about all of this, with the amount of funding that you have, are you confident that you'll be able to carry it out? Are there concerns about not getting it applied to the landscape and utilized?
These are record-breaking times for funds, and it's a concern, and so we're That's why we're putting a lot of our funding, IRA funding, into the Act Now process. So in order to get these quick hits, and a lot of those quick hits probably will be cover crops, I imagine. We do have some other practices in there that could utilize funds. Going from irrigation to dry land would be another larger one. But the other practices, it's yet to be seen. So I suppose there's a bit of concern forward. You know, with EQIP, with CSP, we will probably have to offer a second sign up. Already had our first sign up November 15th. I don't know if we're going to have enough applications to utilize those funds. So we'll open up for a second round.
When will you know, John? Or
Well, we have the number of applications as of November 15th, and I'm talking CSP right now.
yeah,
Okay, we have that. We haven't assessed and ranked them yet. So we don't know, are these large contracts, small, medium size, whatever. And so we generally, over the years I've been around, average $100,000 per CSP contract, pretty much year after year. That's an average, but it varies. And so based on that number, we're probably shy. So, but if we get larger applications in, that'll change. One thing that's different between this year and last year, stop me if I'm boring you too much, but one thing that's changed is prior years, a producer could only earn a payment limitation of $200,000 per farm bill. So if they had a contract in the second year of the farm bill, and a different one in the third, and they hit that 200,000, they were done. In 2025, that's been lifted. The continuing resolution did not continue that forward. So folks that were already capped out could now reapply again for a second contract. So what that means is folks that thought they were done until we get a new farm bill aren't done in 2025. They can still go on.
that's CSP only.
That's no CSP and EQIP. EQIP had a $450,000 maximum payment limitation per producer per farm bill, and that's been lifted for 25 as well. And that's just, I guess, one way to ease the pain of not having a new farm bill. Okay, I'm going to move on to CSP renewals. As you know, folks who have a CSP contract have the opportunity to renew it. They're all 5-year contracts. If it's in the 5th year, we send them letters saying, if you'd like to renew, sign up. And then we obligate those contracts before the end of the calendar year. So these all have to be obligated before December 31st. And so what we've had this year is so far 72 Classic, 16 IRA, CSP applications and contracts that obligated $87 million for the Classics and $1.9 million for IRA applications. And those are 5-year contracts. As I mentioned with EQIP, the IRA dollars went up between 24 and 25, same with CSP. We had we're at 14 million in IRA last year, something like that. We're at 25 million in IRA for CSP. So that with our general allocations brings CSP dollars up to $47 million. Again, for like EQIP, November 15th was the sign up deadline. This is for our general sign up that we're going to be doing this coming winter. We had 370 applications received from that amount. $100,000 is our average. We're projecting here with the kind of funds that we have been given to Nebraska, about 131 classic and 237 IRA CSP contracts. So that's based on those averages that we'll see. So if that's the case, we might need to open up another second cycle. Okay, and of course, we distribute as best we can the funds between our DC areas so that we spread the workload out. Ranking deadlines for CSP for IRA is April 4th, and for general it's April 18th. Right? I will stop there before we go into the RCPP program for any other questions. And if you think of some later, just put them in the chat and we'll address them at that time. So right now I'm going to introduce Emily Webster. Emily is our RCPP coordinator. She began August of this year and is doing a great job. So welcome, Emily.
Thank you, John. Good afternoon, everyone. Nice to see you all and to everybody online. Just want to give a couple updates on RCPP. So the two main things to cover are the fiscal year 24 awarded proposals that were recently announced and sharing a little bit of information on those proposals, as well as giving an update on some current projects that have been underway for a while in the state. So in terms of the fiscal year 24 awarded proposals, the national budget for RCPP in 2024, fiscal year 2024 was 1.5 billion. 1.2 billion of that funding is from IRA. And so proposals were due in July, and there was an overwhelming demand for that funding. There were a total of 323 proposals submitted, requesting $5.4 billion in funding. I should say each proposal could be up to $25 million in a request for funding. And so at the end of October, the announcement was made about the proposals that have been selected for funding. And the proposals that are selected by the Office of the Chief at headquarters. So while states do review each proposal that comes into a given state and provide feedback, the decision's ultimately made by the chief on which proposals are selected nationwide. So at end of October, it was announced that 92 proposals were awarded. The full budget of $1.5 billion has been allocated. And so $1.5 billion is what NRCS is going to be contributing to these projects. And also noteworthy to say is that partners are going to be bringing forth it's $968 million in contributions to these projects. Because again, RCPP is all about NRCS partnering with other organizations out there that are doing conservation work to expand on the work that we're able to do collectively with producers. So in terms of Nebraska, there were 3 classic type RCPP proposals that were submitted and 5 AFAs or alternative funding arrangements, because there's 2 different kinds of RCPP structures that can happen. So the request for funding in total from those 8 proposals was 138 million. And we learned at the end of October that Nebraska was awarded 2 classic and 2 AFA proposals for a total of $85 million. So I'll go into those awarded proposals next. But first, just want to present a visual of kind of how the funding was distributed across the nation. And so the state to get the most funding was Oregon, and we were close second. So while it's unfortunate that all of our proposals weren't able to get funded, there wasn't enough funding for everybody. It is very exciting that the proposals in Nebraska really rose to the top of the crop, and we are second in the nation in terms of what was awarded in terms of funding there. And like I've mentioned, we have 4 proposals that were selected. I think Oregon has 5 proposals. It kind of is, most proposals came in at about the $25 million request mark. It does vary by project, but so in terms of the amount of funding we were awarded, as well as the number of projects, it's both on the higher end for the nation. So now this is a presentation of the proposals that were selected. So they are grouped by, I'll just read them. So the first one is growing and expanding Nebraska's grassland cores. So the lead partner on that project is the Nebraska Community Foundation. That'll be an alternative funding arrangement project, IRA funded, and the financial assistance funding amount is presented there. The next proposal that was selected, and these are not in any kind of scored order, they're just presenting them, I think, organized maybe by project type there. So the next one is Pasture Progress, Advancing Regenerative Beef in Nebraska. The lead partner there will be Prime Pursuits. That's also an alternative funding arrangement project funded through IRA funding. Then kind of moving into some classic projects. So the first one is irrigation and nutrient management in the Lower Loop River Basin. So the lead partner is the Lower Loop NRD. That will be a classic project. The next one is protecting Nebraska's groundwater and grasslands. The lead partner is Nebraska Community Foundation. That's also a classic funded through IRA. I should have mentioned the one before that is the one with the Lower Loop NRD is funded through Farm Bill funding, so it's not tied to IRA funding. The one on the bottom is an AFA project that Nebraska is a partner state on. So this has been awarded to the Intertribal Buffalo Council, and the state that is the lead state is Oklahoma, but Florida, Kansas, and Nebraska are also involved in the project, so we'll be working together on that project. And just again to mention, kind of the AFA project style means that the partner is essentially acting like a mini NRCS, and they are doing the work on the ground with the producers. And there's a limited number of functions that NRCS retains the need to do. Classic projects function very similarly to like an EQIP fund pool. It's work that's done by NRCS offices, and the partner organizations help promote, do reporting, that kind of thing. So in the next couple slides, I'll share a little bit more information about each of these proposals. But as of right now, these were just awarded end of October, and the next step will be to get the actual projects kind of set in place. So there's steps that we're taking with the partners to get those details solidified, like who's doing what, where, how the funding is specifically allocated into what tasks. That needs to be done by the end of April 2025. And we're pushing to get it done as soon as we possibly can to get the funds actually obligated and locked in place. But that's the next step with these. So after they are active in place, then the work will be actually starting to be done in the field. Yeah, question.
It's awesome. Do you have the other projects that weren't awarded, or when would they be able to reapply, I guess? If they were that good to be selected but weren't awarded, what's the time frame for them to have the opportunity or willingness to reapply?
Thanks for the question. The ones that were not selected for funding would have been given some kind of feedback from us already. I imagine the process will be similar to this past year, where the proposals will be accepted into maybe July, and so it would be great to work with them to kind of revise the proposal and submit it again for consideration in that cycle. We haven't heard a specific budget or specifics on that application process, but I imagine it would mirror this past year. Okay, so I'll just go into kind of a snapshot about each of those selected proposals. So this first one is the growing and expanding Nebraska's grassland core. So again, this is an AFA project where the lead partner is the Nebraska Community Foundation. So they're really focusing on conserving mixed grass prairies by targeting woody encroachment. So a lot of prescribed burning, anything that's treating eastern red cedar invasion. And so the idea is that they'll get locked in place, and we are going to be working on with that project for 5 years. A lot of these details we're still working out, so I'm only able to kind of share the overall project goal, kind of minimal details right now, but more will come as these get solidified. So the next one is pasture progress, advancing regenerative beef in Nebraska. It's an alternative funding arrangement project with prime pursuits. So this is going to be available statewide, just the state of Nebraska up there for you. So the goal of this project is to reduce the greenhouse gas footprint of beef cattle production in Nebraska. So the partner is going to be working with producers to implement things like cover crops, seedings, and prescribed grazing. Next one is the irrigation and nutrient management project in the Lower Loop River Basin. So this is a classic project. Again, this will be kind of administered through the NRCS offices in this area. And the whole goal is about really water quality improvement through improved irrigation efficiency and nutrient management. And the next one is protecting Nebraska's groundwater and grassland. So another classic project to be kind of administered through NRCS offices. So the goal with this project is to both enroll grasslands and target biowetlands in US held easements, as well as then doing activities to restore and enhance those areas. So there's very specific target areas that have been identified to do those activities. And this last one is the project with the Intertribal Buffalo Council. So this is all about tribal buffalo restoration in the Southeast region. So this is noteworthy because this is one of 3 projects that the Intertribal Buffalo Council was awarded nationwide. So this project is going to be in Oklahoma, that's the lead state, but we've also got Kansas, Nebraska, and Florida. So within this project, the goal is that the Intertribal Buffalo Council will be doing work with tribes to restore and improve native grasslands and increase buffalo habitat. And so I kind of tried to call out, in Nebraska, they've mentioned all the tribes would be of interest that they want to reach out to and try to work with. But so this project was selected for funding. There was also a project in the Southwest of the US that also received the same amount of financial assistance funding, so $16 million. The one in the Southwest is led by New Mexico, Arizona, Colorado, and Utah are also participating. And then there is another project in the Northern Great Plains where South Dakota is the lead, and Montana, North Dakota, and Wyoming will also be participating. And the goal is there's the same goal across the 3 projects, but it's being, this is a very wide scale, kind of unprecedented concept. So that's another one that we'll be working with as a partner state. So those are I just wanted to share a little bit of information on those proposals that were selected. Now I want to just share a little bit of information, kind of a status report on where we're at with the roster of all of our RCPP projects, because we got quite a list going now. So this is just kind of a snapshot of the classic and alternative funding arrangement type projects that we have. And I just put 2020 is the year that project kind of structure was put in place. So the ones that are, 2020, 2021, those have been going. They are a number of years in. They may be kind of winding down in the funding that they have. And with them, there opportunities that are available for funding still. And as the projects kind of wind down, we would look at renewals, if that would be, an interest of the partner and that kind of thing. But projects that are kind of in red were ones that were, the details were solidified in 2023, and they are this fiscal year starting to be available kind of out on the landscape. And so I want to share a couple slides on that, those projects next. And then at the bottom, the ones that say 2024, those are the ones that were just awarded. So it's just kind of a idea is just kind of to present the roster of where we're at with our CPP projects. So just, I think I have this slide and one more. So I just wanted to share a little bit of information on those projects that were highlighted in red. So this first one, so when I say fiscal year 25 new, it means just that in this fiscal year, this is the first fiscal year that this project will be available for like producer contracts. So this one is titled Improving Grassland Health and Connecting Resilient Lands. The lead partner is the Nature Conservancy. And this is a classic project. So again, it's run through NRCS field offices. And the goal is enrolling priority identified grasslands in producer contracts to enhance those grasslands, really. We've got some core practices that were identified, the focus practices. But the goals are just to improve grassland health and with a special focus on habitat for prairie chickens and sharp-tailed grouse. So this project, the funding for these projects will be available starting this fiscal year out until fiscal year 2029. We'll have producer contracts with this one. And then these two projects are the newly out there on the landscape alternative funding arrangement projects. So these are ones where the partner organizations are doing the work, acting like the mini NRCS to achieve these project goals. So the first one is expanding soil health through carbon markets. So this is a project that South Dakota is the lead state on, but it involves, I believe, 10 states within our region. Nebraska is one of them. So the partner, American Coalition for Ethanol, is working with producers to implement those practices listed there. It's all about reducing the carbon footprint of ethanol production. The next one is the Kansas-Nebraska Wetland Initiative. So this one is, the lead partner is Kansas. It's just Kansas and Nebraska. That one is available statewide, and the idea is to do wetland restoration, invasive species removal, that kind of thing. So I think that should be my last slide. Are there any questions on our CPP from the group?
Yes, ma'am. Just to, good afternoon, ma'am. This is Nav from University of Nebraska Lincoln Extension. Just one question for, you mentioned those 5 projects where UNL is a partner in one of the projects, but my question is public institution allowed to apply for those grants?
Yeah, public institutions are eligible entities to apply for our CPP projects.
Got it, ma'am. Thank you. That's all.
Good question. Yeah, one more in the group here.
Well, I'm not gonna let you off the hook. Like 35 there, I love the fact that we just, everything's a cover crop, no-till, reduce-till, and nutrient management. What are the expectations as a deliverable? I mean, are we reducing, pumping 1 inch? Are we reducing our nitrogen 10%? Or phosphorus? What are deliverables inside of projects like this?
Well, each project is going to have specific outcomes they're wanting to measure. So with this one, they've likely got something like, because through implementing these practices, the net carbon sink will be this much. And they picked the grain sheds specifically because of like a suite of climate factors that would then allow them to kind of model that information. So to try to answer your question, each project is required to identify specific environmental outcomes and how they're going to measure them and report them.
So how do we access those? I guess that's my ultimate question is how do we see, under this scenario and this outcome, what does that mean to a producer? How do we access that? Or how would we eventually see that?
Public, see that?
Yeah, public, producer, landowner.
Yeah, that's a good question.
I mean, I'm gonna go back to Lower Loop. That's a great place. I mean, great partnership with great people and I mean, we're all looking for similar answers to those questions. How do we be profitable? How do we reduce? How do we, up our game in terms of stewardship? And how do we access the successes and the challenges inside of some of these projects?
Yeah, that's a really good perspective.
We don't farm in the Lower Loop, but we are in the Twin Platte and the Upper Republican, Middle Republican, and how do we see? I mean, if we're spending 1.7 million, how does that move outside of those particular success areas?
Right, how is like the findings and the information shared for others who are wanting to do, like you said, they're common goals here. So how can the information from one project be made available and shared to, a wider, to the public, or to anybody? If I'm understanding, yeah, I mean, each year there's reporting that's done on the outcomes, but it is held internally. So it's a good question that I'll have to dig into as to like, how and where would the outcomes on a given project be accessible worldwide?
Yeah, just not specific, just generally speaking, a lot of the partners, there's different field days, there's different events that they would share out their outcomes. I mean, maybe it's during the project or at the end of the project. So I have seen that in the past. So a lot of that would be the partner itself trying to share out what lessons learned, that type of thing. And a lot of times it's through a field day or
It's gonna be local or regional, so, how do you, I mean, these challenges are across the whole state, I mean, can't deny them. And, what are wins and what are challenges, and certainly what we want to be doing or investing in.
I think a lot of it comes down to the implementer. I look at ours in general, and to your point, Rob, I think a lot of the outreach just occurs by some of the commitments that we've made in our RCPP proposal for doing that sort of outreach and sharing that information. I don't know what the actual expectations of reaching the general public are. I think they tend to be pretty focused on like the farmers that they work with in the individual projects in general. But I think it's a good thing to flag. I think as projects get done and engage the groups that are connected to it and give those feedback and do some outreach in general, but do a better job of figuring out how to take those learnings at the end and get them out to the general public.
Well, the NRDs themselves have a rather robust, opportunity to exchange that kind of stuff. But they're also, I mean, they have a lot of things on their plate, and figuring out how those kinds of wins, how do we get that across the state some way, somehow? I just think if you're gonna put $15 million into a project over 4 or 5 years, then good gosh, I mean, why wouldn't that have value across the whole basin or basins or subregions, whatever you want to call it? Is how do we get that as a deliverable? I mean, that, to me, this uplift in money and investment, holy smokes, let's figure out how to help producers across the whole state with that.
There's those activities are there, but I don't know that they're actually required or like a deliverable from NRCS's standpoint. They're just what's kind of verbally committed to within the proposal itself. Like we try to do local, regional, and national level outreach on our project and its successes, but that's not something that's held over us as an expectation to get it out to the general public.
questions, good discussion on that, for sure. Any other questions on RCPP before I turn it over to Fred? WI? Well, feel free to reach out to me if anything else.
There is one question in the chat, not for RCPP, it was kind of back to the EQIP and CSP. But the question was, can you compare the interest in subscription / oversubscription between regular and IRA, EQIP and CSP? Would a potential change to the climate practice spending guardrails for IRA funding via new farm bill have substantial impact on actual participation?
So, yeah, I mean, I think that, so I'll start by saying that we, in Nebraska, our EQIP Environmental Quality at Sea program is oversubscribed. On average, I think we fund roughly 30%, 30 to 40% on average over the past several years. We're able to fund those applications. So I think we're going to continue to see interest. I think with the Inflation Reduction Act, we'll, encouraging, working with the producers to get the applications in back in November, and so we can work through those here this year. But I would say that we're going to continue to have interest in EQIP, whether it's regular Farm Bill EQIP, IRA EQIP. We're going to continue to have that interest. And I don't know, Brad, if I'm helping answer your question, but I think that we'll, as far as the crystal ball and what the Farm Bill brings and how those funds get incorporated, don't get incorporated, I'm not going to touch on that. But I would just say in Nebraska, we are oversubscribed. We have high interest in EQIP and CSP for our Farm Bill programs. And so how can we help facilitate that to work it into the IRA? So hopefully, Brad, that helps. And if not, we can discuss further houses.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Fred Stevens, State Program Specialist. I work with the NWQI project. And before I get really far into these slides, I just want to say thank you to all of our NWQI partners. Our partners would be the NDEE, also a lot of the NRDs, and then also that we meet throughout the years for the sub-water quality meeting. Rourke is part of that. I appreciate him for co-chairing that for us. And so this afternoon, I'm going to talk about the different national water quality initiatives that we have across the state. Nationally, each state has to address 3 Hut 12 NWQI impairments. And for Nebraska, we would go way and above that amount. We go way above that amount. Just in the Brazil alone would hit that mark. And so the different NWQI areas that we have for the state of Nebraska, we have the Brazil, we have the Big Sandy, we have the Turkey, the Wahoo, and then the Bow Creek, that's in a planning phase as right now. But you just start thinking of some of the numbers here. Last year, in the end of the 24 there, we were able to obligate 43 contracts. I shared those numbers with us back in September. And then we spent over $3 million for NWQI. So we spent all of our allotment for the first round, and we requested a lot more and got that additional funds to keep on going through some more contracts. For the Brazil area, again, it's the upper part of the state here, the northeast part of the state. We have the Elkhorn, Lower Niobrara, Lewis and Clark, and Upper Elkhorn NRD. Right now, we have 65 applications in those field offices. There's a lot of applications there. It's a large area. This is the largest NWQI area. The impairment for this area is nitrates. So we're looking about the nitrogen there in the ground. For right now, we are planning to start off with $553,000 for that project area. The next one is the Wahoo. That's in the Lower Platte North here. Talked with their DC here this week. And right now they have 5 applications on hand. They're going to start off with $268,000. That impairment is E. coli and also atrazine.
For the turkey, that's here, the lower big blue, that they had on file right now is 6 applications that could be eligible for this area. For funding, they're gonna start with 352,000, start off with. And this is sort of the hybrid project. It addresses the 3 main impairments that we look at. It addresses the E. coli, atrazine, and also nitrogen. Next one is the Big Sandy. This is down in the little blue area. That they have 17 applications on hand. A little over 500,000 for funding for this coming year, full use. And this is mostly E. coli and atrazine. And a lot of those applications that they get in, it is for 595 for pest management to reduce the atrazine. So their goal is to cut that atrazine in half. Then the Bow Creek here, that's the planning phase. That's been the planning phase for the last couple of years. The local NRD and the local NRCS office has taken a lead on that project, and they are working to see what the interest is from producers. They're trying to put together some town hall meetings, talking about different practices, which practices would treat the impairments the best. That impairment up there is mostly E. coli, is what we're looking at. So again, that's in the planning phase. So again, about that applications here, we have 93 applications altogether for NWQI for the 4 funded projects. And we're gonna start off with about $1.5 million for funding. And again, I just like to throw in this picture here that we all have, we all want clean water at the end of the day, and that is our goal. For that, a world of clean, abundant water, healthy soils, resilient landscapes, thriving agriculture, communities, through volunteer conservation. Any questions?
Rory. Fred, go back a couple slides. I just want a couple, keep going. So one more. Yep, right there. So the Lower Platte North, on any of these projects, are they doing in season? So we're trying to match up with the NRDs on when they sample their test wells, so to speak, for nitrates.
Okay.
And so we did our whole farm last year for the first time ever. I'll be the first to admit I never even thought about doing it. But are they doing any of that kind of robust sampling in terms of that on any of these projects?
So we talked about the 3 partners, the
Yep.
NDE, they're the ones who are doing the sampling. So that they do quarterly sampling and and with the quarterly monitoring, and then that is how they are reviewing and looking at those impairments and seeing if there's a drop in loads or if it's staying about the same. So that they're doing the sampling part of it. And then some NRDs, I believe that Lower Platte North NRD is also doing sampling as well, just to get more of a fine print area. So, and they're sampling at the creeks. Now for wells, I don't know if they're out sampling wells or not, but they are sampling though at the creeks and the water.
And I think I've asked you this question before. Can you qualify for NWQI if you look at kind of a big sampling set to do, I mean, like irrigation wells or livestock wells and household wells in the same area?
So how you qualify is that, we go through the partner. NWQI is all partnership based. That we, as NRCS, we're heavily into the financial part of it and the guidance and specs. The NDE, they take care of the impairments and they work with us, say, hey, this area has an impairment that we need to address. And then with that, they would come then to NRCS, bring that to us. And then we would work then a lot with the NRDs to see if there is a project that we need to be looking at.
It's hard to single yourself out as being part of an impairment. And I'm just trying to figure out a way that we can get more people on board with actually sampling their wells. We were surprised. The stuff that we own was less than 5 parts per million, but the stuff that we rent, it was in excess of 15 to 20 parts per million. Now that was an irrigation well. But it hadn't been in our control for years, but it was developed in 74. But it was a sample well that had never looked back. It had just continually just grown from 2 parts per million up to that 15, 16, 17 parts. And so, just trying to figure out a way that we could fit inside of some of these projects that we could get that better footprint of help. Because we in turn implemented that into our nitrogen management, which we wouldn't have done because we hadn't sampled. And it's easy. I mean, in acre inch of water, what did that mean? Roughly 3 pounds of nitrogen. But again, it's in a restricted basin, so your opportunity at 12 inches or 11 and a half inches is only 40 pounds at best, but that still should be accounted for. And I'm just trying to figure out where that would fit, and maybe it's a question for the room, is where that would fit in kind of NRCS's programming to be able to start to think about that.
Well, and the impacts on cattle that could be drinking that water in the wintertime too. Huge.
Well, yeah, nobody ever asked that question, and once we sample the wells, we have 2 stock wells that we don't use. So you guys don't bring your cows here. I mean, we can't water your cows here. And how do you, what kind of sampling regimen do we need to be on? That's not cheap anymore to do the full analysis of that well. I mean, that's, you send it to Ward or Regen or whoever, but that's not a $15 test.
Russell, sorry, your hand up.
Yeah, Brett, do you have a best estimate of the practices planned for these NWQI areas? Maybe what percentage are structural engineering type practices and what percentages are agronomic practices like cover crops and, like you said, pest management? Does it differ between
It does.
different project areas?
Yeah, so like, I'll just go back here real quick with, so the Brazil, cover crops is a big one, leaf management is a big one, so our 590s are probably top 2 practices in that NWQI area. The Wahoo, cover crops have been the most popular ones. Back about 6 years ago, terraces were pretty heavy. And then when we met with NDE and NRD, they wanted to refocus that, shift it to more of a cover crop, something that could help with the efforting a little bit better than just terraces. The turkey, again, that's sort of our hybrid project. So we're looking at a lot of cover crops, nutrient management, pivots. So that area, we'll see producers apply to put pivots up. And it's not new irrigated ground. It's going from gravity to a pivot. In the big sandy, the last 2 years, it's been that 595 that to reduce the atrazine in half. It's been the big one. Before that, it was cover crops and then some cattle projects. So. And like I said, the bow one that we're still working on the planning phase on that one.
Any other questions? Here, let's give Emily, John, and we've been going at this for a good hour and a half, so let's take a 5-minute break. And then we'll reconvene here at 2:30 with the agenda. So thanks, everyone.
Good, amen.
Right.
That's a really good. Same afterward. On your question.
Compare yourself to combat.
Look at winter. Funny and tragic. Yeah. I realized these. Oh, that's still not. I think that what you want to address.
15.
One of you, that's family.
Everything's good, little boys, 7, almost 5.
Not anymore.
Maybe, yeah, running around with a BB gun and.
It's like, I'll get stuck right here and around the other. He, just over here. Thanksgiving.
Oh, I bet. My mom was one of those, and we all filled these together for Thanksgiving.
That basket.
There was 52 independents and 24 of them grandchildren.
That's awesome.
So it was pretty cool. And there was, I mean, there was a significant amount of people that were out there. And it's neat because they've gotten quiet for a few years too. When the grandkids got. And yeah. It's all-
Guys don't have to be here.
I appreciate my parents, because I know, they'll do a lot of the things. that they-
So this.
All our classes, your kids there. So you get used to it, watching is always out here.
It's not.
They're like, awesome, there's that place next paper, so you can't tell them about.
Go to their workshop on golf. I've been out there.
That's the main. That's the main group. Oh.
Well, that could be for. Well, that's what you used to do. That I didn't see.
So I think they're doing aggregation across all the states to do some type of,
They go far.
maybe. In terms of. Yeah, just go to their website, Shelley.
Yeah, I will. Oh. But my mind won't remember their last name.
It is crazy.
So
I mean,
it's, what's it called?
it's. Farmers Alliance, or practical farmers. Alliance. It's. And you just find it on the website's easy, it takes a while to get paid, so like last year's activity, wasn't getting money for July or August. And then they added this, that was $20. So we bet, we're just here, you have 1,000, 50,000.
Yeah.
To cover costs.
It was right. Yeah.
There's no limit. 5,000.
And so what if you have an NRCS?
Doesn't matter. That's not, that's not, this is all by itself.
Huh. Wow. Now I had no idea.
Yeah.
That's a pretty cool.
Yeah, just go to the website and it is so, yeah, Zach got a kickback. He did, there's something in the box, right? Or whatever. And then they just included, if you will actually put your FSA certification, your dying. Forms it.
The HEO or the?
No, it's just your certified acres.
Oh.
See how
Okay.
that includes 947, 937, whatever it is for crop insurance. And if you put that on there, then it's a net fee. It's plus.
All right, we'll go ahead and reconvene here. Thanks for taking a quick stretch break here. Next up, we have Connor Ward, our Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships. And he's going to share with us a few items on the FY25 Conservation Collaboration Agreements and FY25 State Conservation Innovation Grants information.
Yes, thanks, Rob. I've seen it right here for the. No. Cool. Yeah, again, Connor Ward, Assistant State Conservationist for Partnerships. As of June here from Nebraska NRCS.
Just wanted to take a brief moment of today's meeting to hit on a couple of new funding opportunities that we anticipate having here. Under my shop is grants and agreements. So aside from the financial assistance programs, areas and programs that I come from, I'm now working in these different grants and agreements offerings that we have. So one exciting opportunity that's first time we will anticipate having a competition here in Nebraska is a state SIG competition. So that stands for Conservation Innovation Grants, also referred to as SIG or CIG all the time. There are national SIGs. That is a wider, broader competition, of course. But then states do have the opportunities to have their own state ran SIG competitions. So the national CIGs, those have came about every couple of years here. Have had different partners tap into those. UNL, I know, got a couple of those awarded this past year for fiscal year 2023, announced in 2024. One, I believe, was looking at alley cropping. For alley cropping as an example. And then the other was, I believe, for biochar production having to do with the Western sugar. So as I stated, we are going to have our own state competition this year. We're dedicating 1.9 million of our EQIP IRA funds towards this grant opportunity. So knowing that it's EQIP IRA funds that we're using, priorities and such, and projects that we'll need to review and accept, they have to be geared towards those CSAP things, list of practices. So just something to keep in mind. And I apologize, no slides today. It's new enough. I don't have those built up yet, so I'm going to be reading a little bit from the script here. But what are SIGs? And what do they do? So CIGs, they support the development and demonstration of innovative conservation approaches and technologies that are not yet widely adopted. So think innovation, things like that. The development of a new technology or tool for use by ag producers or conservation professionals, software tools, smartphone apps, field guides, handbooks, things like that. Testing of new or modified approaches to inform a modification or update of an existing NRCS conservation practice standard. So think of all of our different practices and all of our standards that we have. Is there something that out there that we're missing, we're not informed about, or we made a change to? SIG kind of fits that bill. Development of environmental markets and conservation finance approaches to increase the total amount of funding available for private and working lands conservation. And then, as I kind of hit on, more widespread adoption of innovative and effective conservation technologies and approaches. So the idea is, is there something out there that we currently can't fund through EQIP? Is there something out there, as I said, that our standards are currently missing? That's kind of what these SIG grant opportunities are. To continue on, SIG funds early stage pilot projects, field demonstrations, and on-farm research for approaches and technologies that have been studied. The projects are typically carried out, they're not required to be carried out on private lands. So they can be carried out under more controlled conditions on university or extension lands. And the specific things with these SIG classic projects, they do not provide funding directly to ag producers. So as I stated, UNL's one of the entities that were eligible, and they were available, or they were awarded these funds to delve into new research and things like that. A little bit more, who is eligible? State or local governments, federally recognized American Indian tribes, non-governmental organizations. The eligible boundary, of course, since this is a state-ran competition, has to be just dedicated solely to the state of Nebraska. National SIGs can cross over state lines. There is a matching funds requirement, so 1-to-1 matching funds requirement for SIGs. The required match may consist of any combination of cash, services, materials, equipment, or third-party in-kind contributions. So it can be something that other third parties can tap into and assist with those matching funds components. NRCS technical assistance is minimal. So we do the producer eligibility, or if there's a producer involvement in it, we would do that producer eligibility. And then the environmental evaluations, and that's about it. Partners, of course, our involvement would involve some consultation with us if there are questions in regards to practices or standards, whatever. Essentially, the grantees are responsible for the technical assistance component required to successfully implement. So more to come on SIGs and our funding opportunity here in Nebraska. As I said, we'll use $1.9 million of our EQIP funds towards this. Anticipate the sign-up announcement to be ran from, I believe it's February 16th into March. More to come on that as we get closer to that. We're currently, for both of these grant and agreement opportunities I'm talking about, currently awaiting some clearance with OMB and getting our templates and our funding opportunity verbiage in our templates worded just right.
In March, Connor, do you think, or end of March?
Anticipating mid-March.
30 days.
And of course, both of these opportunities I'm talking about, grants.gov, it's moving along. Another opportunity that we've had here in years past are conservation collaboration agreements. Conservation collaboration agreements are more agreements as opposed to grant. But the emphasis of those and our interest in those is building technical capacity of NRCS and partner field employees to implement our Farm Bill programs, building new capacity of local partners to develop and implement effective projects that benefit Farm Bill programs, leveraging of federal, non-federal, and non-governmental resources to achieve natural resource conservation outcomes, and then reaching historically underserved farmers and ranchers. So again, it's that leveraging of partner and our resources to achieve common goals, outcomes, and whatnot, and our delivery of our programs, assistance. Areas of priority of interest, urban ag, improving soil health, watershed performance, dealing with water quantity and quality issues, improvement of habitat for local wildlife species of concern, improvement of the conservation of natural resources, the economic performance of working ag lands, improving the use and effectiveness of new technologies in ag, expanding outreach to promote conservation programs to new customers and historically underserved customers. Also, improving rangeland productivity, health, mitigating pest plant pressure. So again, those are our state-specific goals and kind of objectives that we're after these operation agreements. With these, there's no match required. It's good if there is a match, but unlike the CIGs and some other grant opportunities out there, there's no match required. Again, you can apply once we get those templates out through OMB. Grants.gov is a place to apply for these. And like the CIGs, we anticipate February 16th getting the sign up through April 1st. Conservation collaboration agreements. That would be Shelley, like Sand Hills Task Force. Those, again, both of these are competitive. I mentioned that. Competitive process, there's a ranking and scoring procedure. How we rank and score them will be all listed in the template that comes out for the notice of funding opportunity for each of these. So just always kind of stress, if you're thinking about applying and wondering, how can I best pitch for my project or whatnot. Scoring is how we score those and evaluate those are all right there in the template.
Are they updated now, Connor, on grants.gov?
No.
They're not?
No, so that is the part that we're currently waiting on. National has to come out with a template, get the wording, way that they need it. And then states have the ability to make tweaks and make specific priorities.
Well, what would be a fair time frame to look? I mean, is that going to be a mid-January? What do you think?
Well, for the CCAs, February 16th through April 1st is the anticipated sign up.
But I mean, prior to that, in terms of the template and start the application process.
It will be posted on grants.gov. Right? So, once it's posted, then that's when the partners can review the funding opportunity and submit your application. So when it's posted there, that's when you're going to have access to it. But we're going to send. We continue to send when we have these funding opportunities. When they go live, we'll send that out to the state technical committee distribution list.
Okay.
So we'll send that out so everyone is aware that, hey, it's open.
The window's open. That's what I was asking is when can that, what time frame on either one of these two, that window would open, I guess. That's my question. Knowing that the application period is February 16th. What would we hope for?
So I feel like, and I'm not an expert in the agreements, but we put it on the grants.gov, right? We posted it and I don't know if if it's open for a couple of days before it goes live or if that's when it's posted and that's for the duration. I don't know if anyone knows. I don't know.
I think whoever puts it in can decide, but usually whenever it's live or open, the 16th is a Sunday. I'm going to guess they won't open it on Sunday. But I think it's posted. You can sign up for alerts. I've tried that. You get bombarded.
I did that. I did the same thing.
Yeah.
We shut it off.
Yeah. So I just saved an alert on my calendar to go off on February 17th to go look for it. That's how I handled that.
Oh, okay. That's a good idea because I got off the other alerts. That was obnoxious.
Yeah. But yeah, we'll definitely send out once it's live, we'll send that out to all partners or everyone on our distribution list. But I don't know the inner workings of grants.gov of how, if it's once it's live or if it's live a few days before you can actually go in and start it. We'll make sure and get that out to everyone.
Questions for me on their CIGs or CCA opportunities?
Wait, anything in the chat? Very good. Good, Connor?
As they get posted, if there's any questions at all, just feel free to reach out to me.
Very good. Well, changing gears from programs and partnerships, we're going to talk technical here for a little bit, right, Corey? So we have Corey King. He's our state wetland coordinator, and he's going to share with us some information on our state wetland off-site method guidance. Corey?
All right, thanks for the intro, Rob. Yeah, I'm going to talk about our state off-site method a little bit here. But before I get into that, I'm going to do kind of a very brief overview of what wetland compliance is, just so we're all on the same page of what this is for. So wetland compliance, you may have heard of it as the swamp buster provisions of the Food Security Act. Essentially, the layman's terms of that is, in order for participants to be eligible for all these, awesome farm bill programs that our folks have been talking about today, they have to be in compliance with that provision, which essentially states that a producer cannot convert a well and still be eligible for the farm bill. And so this, our offsite method is for our wetland compliance team that processes these requests from producers to determine if they have wetlands on their property. So we're talking about, this is a revised version of, we have an existing version that has been great and has served us well up to this point. But with some, revisions and processes and policy, it was time for us to update our SOSM, all up to date with most national policies. So a brief history of the SOSM in Nebraska. The very first one was written in 2017. And we effectively implemented its initial use in 2019-ish or so. From that point, that helped us speed up the process considerably. Prior to that, we were going on site to every single one to do field visits, as opposed to utilizing all of these off-site resources that I will be talking about here for this presentation to help make those decisions without having to go to the field. So as I already kind of talked about a little bit, the purpose of the new SOSM is to make sure that we are aligned with the most current national policy and to also streamline the process for compliance folks to better serve our producers, make sure we get those determinations out as quickly as we can. Quick overview of what that process is in more detail. Essentially, it consists of three kind of big steps. The first one is identifying wetlands. So are there wetlands on the property or then the next part that goes to what is the label of those wetlands? Are they converted? Is it farm wetland? Is it just a straight wetland? What is it? That's that. And the final step is determining how big it is. So those are steps. Okay, so this is kind of when the team uses the SOSM. It's all based off of the core manual. Level 1, which is considered on-site inspection unnecessary. What that means is we're doing it completely off-site, using all off-site resources to make our decision on if it meets all three factors, which are hydrophytic vegetation, hydrology, and hydrosoils. So those are our three factors that we're looking for when we're making those decisions. And then level 3 is a combination of 1 and 2. So for example, maybe we're able to use web soil survey and make a determination that hydric soils are present. But maybe we're not sure about hydrology. It's tree cover, we don't know. So that would be an example of something where we use a combination of factors. Then we also utilize section F, which is atypical situations, and section G, which are problem areas, and core manual for problematic and odd, weird situations that sometimes come up. Talk about vegetation first here. So these are some of the resources that we use. Some of these we are currently already using, and hopefully in the future some of these may be added to the list actually. So right now we're relying primarily on official series descriptions, and I will talk a little bit. I have another slide on that in just a second, so I'll talk more about that. And then we have range site descriptions, which we'll talk a little bit more about that here in a minute as well. Of course, National Wetland Inventory, which is a U.S. Fish and Wildlife product, but is something that we are allowed to utilize and we will as we can. And then aerial imagery, and then ecological site descriptions. There is a caveat with that one right now, in that most of our ecological site descriptions in Nebraska are not built out to the point where we can really use them yet, but that's a kind of a hopeful, wishful thing in the future that we eventually will have that in the toolbox as well. Okay, so this is an example, going back to the official series descriptions. in Nebraska, we have point here. So we have used this use and vegetation section. And for soils that are hydric soils that are common soils that we run into, we have worked with our state biologist, Rich Nelson, et cetera, and have added these vegetation explanations for these different soil series that they do meet vegetation offsite based off the official series description. So now we don't have this for every single hydric soil in Nebraska. We focused on the most common ones that we run into. We have, like I say, we have these little additions that basically explain what the vegetation would be in these areas or should. So this is an example of national wetland inventory. So we have these are all these codes that mean something, and we'll talk about a little bit about that. So in this case, the P stands for palestrin, which those are non-tidal wetlands. Essentially, these are what we see primarily in Nebraska. And then the EM stands for emergent, so that's getting into I'm gonna go to the next slide here. Yeah, so we have this kind of shows it nicely here where we have different codes that we can apply in Nebraska. The ones that we can use are the ones that are highlighted here, which are aquatic bed, emergent, shrub, scrub, and forested. Obviously, we don't have unconsolidated shore. Obviously, we don't have a shoreline in Nebraska. The unconsolidated bottom and rock bottom, those don't have veg components, so we can't make a vegetation decision off of those. Yeah, so on here. So this is another tool we can use sometimes, which is just aerial photography. This is not something that we're probably going to use a lot of, but it's going to be more of a last ditch resort, especially if the imagery is really good and we can really distinguish what we're seeing. In this example, kind of we have cattails and phragmites dominating in the center with brome and reed canary kind of on the edges. Kind of tell somewhat the difference with the color of the vegetation. But it's difficult. It's very much an acquired skill to be able to tell vegetation from aerial photography. It's not always the best quality. On the soils here. So these are kind of how we divide our soils up. We have SA, which is soil mapping, and it has hydric soil as part of its name. We have an example here, for example, Marlake mucky peat. Mucky peat immediately tells us it's a hydric soil. It's in the name, so we would automatically say it's hydric. And then the next one, SB, so that's when the soil mapping is named for a miscellaneous area. So for example, water. Another one that we commonly see in Nebraska is wet alluvial land. I've seen that in a few areas that can show up as well. Those are the two best examples we have here, and of course playas as well. Then SC would be still the soil mapping has the hydric soil as part of its name. But that portion of the mapping is related to the hydric soil if the landform is consistent with the landform of the hydric component. This and SC and SD kind of blur together a little bit. The best example is kind of down here where we have a holdridge with a Fillmore inclusion. Now we kind of just got cut off on here, but so the Fillmore would be for a playa landscape, whereas holdridge would be probably a different landscape. It's not playa. So we would be concentrating on if it fits the landform of that Fillmore and say it's a playa and confirm that it's a hydric soil. Okay, moving on. So we have a non-obvious non-wetland process. Some of you may have heard this. This is we used to call it the Appendix A process. You may have heard it called that in the past. This is designed to look at areas that are obvious non-wetlands And that, to kind of speed that process up, so we're not spending a lot of time looking at something that's on top of the hill and not in a water receiving position. So these are kind of the criteria that are laid out here that allow us to make these decisions. So the first one is that if there is a hydro component, that it is less than 5% of the overall map unit. And even if it meets, and it doesn't meet the landform, it meets the land. So the next part would be LiDAR confirms that it's not in a water receiving position. So we'd be looking at, is this a bottomland type area? Is this an area that's going to collect water? That would, cue us in that, this area may be a wetland, it may not be a wetland if it's not in a water receiving position. And then of course, if there are no wetland signatures before 1986, the reason 1986 is used is, our 1986 imagery would have been flown in spring of 86. Our 1985 imagery would have been flown in spring of 85. Farm Bill was signed in December of 85. So that's why we go at least to 1986 so that we can say for sure that there were no wetland signatures. Then, so the sample unit is a PJW. So what that stands for is potential jurisdictional water. This would be, for example, if in the area there is a named creek, stream, river, something like that. It's obviously not a Farm Bill wetland. It would potentially be fall under 404. We could potentially use it for those types of situations. And then kind of the last one, which is kind of a combination of all of the above. There are this last point at the bottom about small tree covered areas less than 5 acres. The key there is that all 3, A, B, and C must apply, or we can definitively tell that D applies, that it's clearly in PJW, even if it's covered by trees. A lot of times you don't go LiDAR and go, okay, we see the shape of that stream flowing through those trees. That applies. So the important definitions with this, though, is that this cannot be used when there is any type of drainage present. So if there's been some sort of man-made manipulation to potentially drain the area, we cannot use this obvious non-wetland. And as we have our definition of drainage, essentially it says any human-induced activity in the adjacent area, give or take, that may alter the depth, duration, frequency, or timing of the hydrologic condition, which can include inundation or saturation of that site. This is directly from the SLSM. This is just where it's stated. Okay, so now we'll talk about hydrology. It's kind of our third prong to our stool here. We're primarily going to be using aerial imagery to make our hydrology decisions. But we have some other tools that we're adding to our toolbox as well. Sometimes some areas we just don't have enough imagery to make the call, or we have some sort of circumstance that maybe we're not looking at normal circumstances for some reason and we can't rely upon imagery. We can also use the water features report. This is from Loeb Soil Survey. It's a very useful tool. I'll show an example here in just a second. National Wetland Inventory also has a hydrology component to it as well, so we can also rely upon that to some degree. I will note that if we, for example, if we use National Wetland Inventory to do vegetation, we can't then use it to do hydrology, because that would be what we call a conflation of the factors, because we're using the same source to make the decision from 2 factors. So if we do use National Wetland Inventory, for example, to make a decision, you can only use it for vegetation. You can only use it for hydrology. You can use it for both at the same time. So you can also use US topo maps. They have some historical data there that can be helpful. And then of course soil survey maps. For example, you have them old marsh symbols that show up on soil survey, turkey foot these folks would put on there. Those can be useful for determining hydrology as well. Okay, so talking about the aerial review here, kind of the initial step is going to be to review all aerial imagery that we have. Mainly what we're looking for there is the site manipulated or not? And then that will kind of determine which process we're going to follow. We have different types of assessments based upon if there's no post 85 drainage or no post 85 drainage, or if there is post 85 drainage. Different things are afforded based upon what type of manipulation to document and when those manipulations occur. So then from that point, we decide the hydrology assessment that we'll use for each sample unit. So a tricky part to this is the irrigation. Particularly in Nebraska, we have a lot of irrigated lands, particularly in the center part of the state. When we are considering irrigation, we have to take into consideration the effect that additional irrigation water is having on the hydrology of the area. So for example, we cannot use so INU stands for inundation, SAT is saturation. So we can't use either one of those indicators when the area is being irrigated in the imagery that we're looking at, because it could be a false positive. It could be that that irrigation water is causing that area to be considerably wetter than maybe it would normally be. So our solution to that is to look at 3 normal year images prior to the installation of that irrigation practice, whether that be gravity irrigation, center pivot, whatever that individual is using to irrigate the land. We would look at 3 normal year images prior to that. If those 3 images are not available, then we would use wet or dry years that are also in that same time period about to balance that out to make the decision. And then the last resort is to use a comparison site of an area that's not being irrigated. That might have, what that area would have looked like if it wasn't under irrigation. Okay, so these are kind of the categories for our imagery review. Essentially, we have 2 categories that I've already mentioned: inundation and saturation. These are all the types of things that we would be looking for. Inundation primarily is going to be standing water. Examples of that on imagery can be reflecting back. It could be like a little white area that's reflecting sunlight off of water. You can physically see water. Sometimes it looks like a black pool. You can kind of see stuff like that. It shows up. And then for saturation, we're looking for all of these different possible things that we can see, whether that be saturated soil, difference in planting dates, stunted crops. This is just showing where the water features report is located. You would want to use this, you could go to Soil Data Explorer, Soil Reports, and then the water features report is right down here. And we always make sure that we check for minor soils as well, because there could be minor inclusions that are hydrates that would potentially be relevant. Here's an example of what that report looks like. So primarily what we're looking for here is, in this example, we'll be looking at our growing season, which is this category, looking at what's in the growing season. So for example, if it's not wet during the growing season, then it's, it's probably not a well. Primarily what we're looking for though is, a water table is occurring within the upper 12 inches. In this example, we have a tryon here that meets right here, 0 to 1.5 feet. That's an example there. Also, loop also meets in this example, and so does Marley down here. But for example, up here, the L's does not meet because it's more than 2 feet below the surface. My page is even further down. So that's kind of how you would interpret this. And then over here, we have the categories of ponding and flooding. We would look at duration and frequency. We're looking for frequent ponding and flooding, and then looking for something that's very long, i.e. more than, at least at the minimum, more than 15 days. In case this one's more than 30 days. Or Lake would meet for sure for ponding and flooding. So that's an example of how you could use the water features report to show hydrology. Okay, so now circling back to national well and inventory, we have different modifiers that are part of this code. They kind of indicate what the water regime in those areas might be. So we have this A as an example of one, which stands for temporary flooded. The problem with that one is that it doesn't have a definitive time period, and the Food Security Act clearly states what the length of saturation and inundation need to be in order to meet hydrology. So in this case, temporary flooded, we're talking about something that may only be temporarily flooded for a few days. A couple of days isn't long enough to me. But we also have this other one here, for example, C, which is seasonally flooded. This is talking about extended periods of saturation or inundation. In this case, surface water being present during the growing season. And it could be absent by the end of the growing season. And that's pretty typical, particularly in Nebraska. First part of the growing season, if they're out there April, May, that period, you might have standing water. And then by the time you go out there in August, there may not be any water. Yeah, so it's just a breakdown of all the modifiers. I'm not going to go through all of these. Obviously, some of these are not relevant to Nebraska. Obviously, tidal indicators not relevant for us, but all of these non-tidal indicators can be. This is the list of the ones that meet off of where. Okay, so next up, topo maps. So primarily, these can be useful for showing, we have marsh and swamp areas, different types of swamp symbols, essentially, what we're seeing here. In this example, this is what the topo looked like, and this is the actual imagery of that area. We can see that we have marsh symbol, and you look at the imagery, it's very wet. So that's an example of how we could use topo maps. And then, then the last but not least, the soil survey. Primarily be looking for these marsh or swamp symbols, that little guy there, or this wet spot symbol, which is that little guy right there. Those are on the historical surveys. Web soil survey doesn't have all of them on them, unfortunately. So sometimes we have to go to the old paper copies to really see some areas, but hopefully one of these days web soil survey will eventually have all those symbols on it. All right. So talking about more specific on the hydrology assessment, just a repeat of what I just talked about, so I'm going to skip that and move on to this a little bit. Talk about this in a little bit more detail. I kind of cued into it earlier, but this is just the different scenarios where we're looking at hydrology for sites without pre-85 drainage, hydrology for sites with pre-85, where best drain condition is considered. Best drain condition is essentially the driest that area appears based off of whatever manipulation occurred. And there could be an example where we have pre-85 drainage where BDC is not considered. An example there would be if there are trees on that site in 85, we would not consider BDC. Then of course there's post-85 drainage, which typically in that case, we're either looking for a conversion. That's typically what we're looking at. Or you have a case where if there's no pre-85 drainage and there's post-85 drainage. Or WX, that's the other possibility. It's something that didn't make crop production possible. So moving on here, so there's just kind of an example. This is our kind of what our new hydrology worksheet will look like. In this example, we have a couple of different sites here. Obviously, this first site here, no signature across the board. Very clear as to what's happening here. We have another site where we have saturation in 7 out of 9 years. There we go. Yeah, there we go. And then the third site here where we have 2 out of 9 years, which is not enough to me. So, this is how these will look going forward. This is our new data form, what it will look like. This is designed to tie into the SOSM itself. So all of these different factors, example, pre-85 land use history. So that's if there's cropping history, et cetera. That's where that is there irrigation affecting our sample unit? What's the landform? Is there pre-85 drainage? So what type of drainage is it? And what does BDC apply? And what year is BDC? Then did it support woody veg in 85? That's important, right? Because woody veg is there in 85, then BDC does not. And then we start thinking about normal circumstances. That's a key part in all of our decisions is what we're looking at normal circumstances and have normal circumstances change based upon some sort of manipulation that's occurred. And of course we have vegetation, soils, hydrology, all of those factors that will get listed on here. Our previous worksheets were much more complicated than this. Used a very complicated system of codes that was not very clear as to what it was. This revised worksheet is designed to be much more clear for field offices to interpret. You know, when that producer comes in, they can look at the sheet and explain how we got to our decision, whether this area is allowed or not. It also has a dual benefit for us as an organization that we have new folks that we hire on as biologists to help out to do compliance, that this makes that process a lot easier for us to teach them how to distinguish these three factors as they become. Okay, so with that, questions?
You intending to reevaluate all the wetlands under this process or just take what you currently have and just plop it into the new form?
No, we're not going to reevaluate any determinations that have already been completed. This is just going to be a new process going forward. And honestly, it's not really that much different from our existing process. It's just a revision essentially of it to simplify things and speed up our process. Questions online? Julie? No. Okay, great. Thank you very much. All right, next up. Soil Health Subcommittee and then partners, if you have any updates, be thinking of those so we can share those out. That's the last thing on the agenda. So Carlos, you're gonna do a speed round for us. I'm positive of this.
We gotta get out of here and sit down.
So we can.
Yeah. So I've got stocking stuffers for any of our partners that don't have a Midwest Cover Crop Council cover crop field guide. All right. Okay. Great stockings. My wife doesn't let me bring stuff like this home, so I've got to keep it up here. So give it away as much as not hurt my feelings if you take much. All right. This has been an effort that I've been working with Rob on and working with programs on to try to think about if it's reasonable for us to maybe recruit a new state tech committee, subcommittee for soil health. So that's what we're going to talk about today. Thanks for letting me take time on the agenda.
And we got a volleyball game tonight to watch, so I'll be quick. Before we get started talking about why it's important to have a voice on our state tech committee meeting, or on our state tech committee, I want to talk about our soil health program. We have a strategic plan that we signed and ratified 6 years ago, and the mission statement still applies today. And that is advancing soil health in Nebraska by promoting partnerships in support of natural resource conservation. I consider all of our state tech committee participants to be those partners who support our natural resource conservation efforts. So today, the executive summary is we want to recruit a state tech committee, soil health subcommittee to increase the opportunities for and effectiveness of NRCS Farm Bill programs related to soil health management system implementation, success, and long-term practice adoption. And we could end the entire slideshow here, but we'll go a little bit more. A little bit of a background. We don't have a lot of information about this effort, but from what we can tell, back in 2016, we had a state tech committee subcommittee for soil health. I found a couple of PowerPoint slide decks. I found a sign-in sheet. So we're going to assume 2016 was the first year, and we have a few topics that I'll talk about in a little bit. But I just wanted to share that back in 2016, the NRCS Soil Health Initiative was a brand new effort from NHQ. We had all this information about cover crop practices, about crop rotation practices, but locally in Nebraska, we weren't sure on which practice scenarios we wanted to adopt, which practice scenarios were profitable, where our producers in Nebraska had the resources to adopt and implement. We had a lot of questions. We weren't sure what the science was telling us. We weren't sure what we could actually get on the ground. So 2016 was a really good time to have this committee come together and make those decisions about practice. Sign-in sheet, real quick, FSA, state committee members, UNL Extension, Game and Parks, DNR, Center for Rural Affairs, a couple of NRDs, Soybean Board. There you go. That's some encouragement to do it, right? Plow Lake Joint Venture. And again, the decisions were made based on those that need to have local input on those soil health practices. So today, we find ourselves in a similar situation. That group, I believe, disbanded in 2018, maybe. So they lasted a couple of years. I couldn't tell you how many times they met. I couldn't tell you what they discussed. All I can say is we don't have one today. So we think that as the soil health and regenerative ag movement continues to evolve, whether that's in technology, whether it's in science, whether it's timing of planting, termination methods, all these different scenarios, technology incorporation, we have a need to reevaluate our conservation practices, fully understand what we're offering, what we're not offering, and look at a very thorough look at our payment rates to make sure that we're applying these practices and that we're offering these practices correctly. Also, if you were looking at the CSAP, the Climate Smart and Forestry practice list that John shared earlier, had the facilitating practice and the supporting practices. There were some practice codes that you may not have ever seen before, and those are called CEMAs, these conservation evaluation monitoring activities, CEMA practices, that I feel like we get new CEMAs maybe every couple of weeks. But it's a newish concept within RCS to have these management of these monitoring activities. And right now there's about 4 of them that are really taking off nationwide. These are 204, 216, 221, 222. The ones that I think we have the ability to adopt in Nebraska, 204 and 216, I feel like we could adopt those immediately, but we don't have we want your input on that. There's a lot of They're very complicated. It's difficult to plan unless we have guidance from the state tech committee on how exactly we need to use these practices. And also talking about payment rate, I don't want to give too many examples because I've ruined our next meeting, but decisions on payment rates, payment caps. But right now, those decisions are being made in-house. Our goal is to spend money, get that conservation on the ground. Is there a way we can do that more effectively, be more, or more efficiently and be more effective with our conservation on the ground? So again, the solution, pretty transparent this afternoon, but reestablish the soil health subcommittee, develop a project charter to identify the roles and charges of the committee. So what exactly are we going to be responsible for? Who's going to be involved? How do we get our information from this group to the state tech committee, and ultimately on Rob's desk? Today, present the proposal to the state tech committee and then work really hard in the next couple of months to recruit not only our state tech committee members, university, state and federal agencies, other soil related individuals within our NRCS, and also producers. Post timeline. Thanks for fixing this. I had 2024 on everything, but we're going to move into 2025 here in a couple of weeks. So thanks for updating my PowerPoint. Present today. Here in the next couple of months, again, define exactly what the role of the committee is going to be. Develop project charter and bylaws. I'm kind of big on that. I enjoy doing that. That sounds nuts. But I'd like to host our first meeting sometime around March 2025. When we get some of the feedback, or maybe wait until we get all the feedback from our local work groups so that we have some direction on things that we can work on immediately. But at that time, share with you again what the charge of the group is going to be, what we can work on. But the main thing is strategically frame our meetings so that we have things to work on during those times. I even wrote it down. Yeah, local work group recommendations. Thought I was going rogue, but it was there the whole time. And then again, meet in August of 2025 so we can make decisions that can go and be implemented for FY 2026. Then get to work. Deadlines are approaching. Again, membership. I think having the same membership footprint that we had back in 2016 is important. I thought it was comprehensive and representative of not only the state tech group, but also fits with Rob's philosophy on who should be involved in this decision making. So state tech committee, NRDs, partners, UNO extension, research, our partnering NGOs, and then again, Nebraska producers. I think that's equally as important. So the way it's going to be organized, I guess I haven't brought Nathan in front of this group yet, but we did hire a state soil health specialist. That's Dr. Nathan Mueller. He'll be the co-lead for this group, working closely with the chairperson to determine when the meetings are going to be held, take meeting minutes, bring up topics, make those types of suggestions. Administrative support is going to be provided by Colleen O'Brien. Colleen's here. She'll be able to talk about here in a minute. And I have interested participants should email Colleen. Colleen, you want to say anything about this?
Yeah. So as we said, we're trying to recruit people to join this very exciting Soils Health Subcommittee. We are looking for anybody who is interested in joining to email me. My email address is right down there. By the Friday, January 31st of 2025, email me if you'd like to participate in that. And then I'll work with Dr. Mueller on getting everything ready. And then by February 21st, that is a Friday,
No later than that date, you will receive an email with information about the subcommittee meeting happening in March. So it could be a little bit before then, but no later than February 21st. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me. If I don't know the answer, I'm more than willing to work with Dr. Mueller or Carlos, whoever, to get those answers to you.
Is that Lasagna?
Yeah.
Lasagna, what's up?
Okay, sorry. I've kind of listened to all of the stuff, but in particular with the water and the soil health, I haven't heard much, or maybe I wasn't supposed to hear much in regards to how we're addressing with water as well as soil, the biosludge issues, and the things that are affecting, that has to do with PFAS, forever chemicals, PFOS, PFOA, PFNA, PFHXS, and endocrine disrupting chemicals that are affecting farms and animals, and is runoff and things like that into our rivers and streams and things. Is that a problem that is being looked at with the soil health and regenerative ag movement? Because there's a lot coming out about that, and it's pretty affecting to people, and it doesn't seem to be being really addressed in a lot of states, or at least especially not even in the US, these things. And biosludge, I know, is a big issue, and I know it's something that, or at least heard practiced in Omaha, as well as the lead issues. Is there any discussion into looking into those problems?
Actually, so there is, I'm a selfish soil scientist, so I think soil health should be involved with every program that we have within NRCS. But we do have a water quality subcommittee through the state tech committee. And I believe and I know Katie's on, but you know, the water quality committee subcommittee does focus on how we're using those practices to address, and I couldn't speak on the PFAS chemicals, but I do know with our nitrogen in the groundwater and E. coli, atrazine issues, I do know that group works on that. The soil health committee, I think we would focus more on our grazing lands. That's where I feel like we have some areas that we can improve on. What practices are we using in those areas to improve? Not only forage quality, forage production, so much. I think we can do a lot of good work, but we'll be working mainly on just improving the health of the soil, increasing organic carbon, and focusing on that, I think, initially. And I do see some overlap between members in the water quality subcommittee and the soil health subcommittee. But again, we have a lot of work to do, and it plays out differently on Rob's desk, but ultimately, I think we can be an effective group together. Thank you, Lasagna. Any other questions? That's all I have on my slide deck. I've got about 392 more of those cover crop field guides, so we're going to work hard in the next year to get those out. Yes, sir.
Carlos, and the legislature has already allocated, Dean, maybe you can speak to it. The legislature's already allocated some effort into this soil health piece. How do you see that playing a role in this? And I like where you're headed with this. Producers are confused about what soil health is, and it's constantly put up here in front of us as soil health. Okay, really, what does that mean? And what does that mean to our operation in our particular part of the world? So we work with an outfit called Practical Farmers of Iowa. That is a no-nonsense, straightforward, get her done outfit. And we've done it. This will be our third year with them in our own operation and I think we're right at 11,000 acres now of enrolled and paid for over the 3-year time period on cover crops. So, I mean, it's a bunch. And so if there's, I guess I'd be interested in helping you in any way I can. I already co-chair this water quality subcommittee, and so I was interested in those comments about PFAS but we kind of need to have a little more than that and just throwing a dart at the dartboard about I mean, how can we prioritize those things? And I'm looking over at Jacob as well too, is how do we know and how do we prioritize those kinds of questions around water quality?
Yeah, go ahead. Look, Peter. Okay, so money that was appropriated by the legislature for the soil, very limited. I can't.
It's already spent.
It's already, yeah, pretty much spent. But the design was to set up like kind of these regional producer hubs where producers get together and share information. It never really materialized into that.
Yep.
Some of the NRDs got some of the money and did some things locally with some existing programs. But funding is the main issue.
So that backbone already exists. I guess where I was headed, that the backbone is kind of there, Carl, so maybe you're aware of that.
Yeah, well, yeah, we're get through, Ken, I guess, do you want to say anything, Ken, or?
Just can't hear,
yeah. Just the backbone, we came together, there were quite a few entities out there with similar goals. And so it became obvious, we're all trying to get to the same producers. So we're working together, we formed a strategic ag coalition. Basically, that's a group of non-producers trying to reach producers. And we've got a website that's not out there yet, but it's close. Several people in this room, the NRDs, Dean, Carlos, Jacob, there's a lot of us involved in that effort. The funding is not all spent. It rolls over. We're in pretty good shape funding wise with regard to that. There's a formation of the Nebraska Soil Health Coalition. We give them some seed money to get them up and going. They're doing a pilot project down at Hastings. We work with, as Dean mentioned, some NRDs to do other things. This next year, we're trying to reach out and do some producer field days. And actually, this past week in our brainstorming session, your name came up for it. So I may be talking to you.
We did some a whole bunch of inter-row stuff with high boys and measuring nitrous oxide and we've got a bunch of stuff we did. So yeah, absolutely. I'd be glad to.
So yeah, with the focus of increasing long-term adoption of cover crops as an example, we have the body like these efforts that are coming together to support a unified message to producers, to have a one-stop shop or just a main website somewhere where the resources can be made available. And on our end, we're offering our programs, but we want to eliminate some of that confusion. We want to offer what's actually going to work, what's reasonable, and bring y'all together to come give us that information so you know exactly what we can offer through our equipment, CSP and even CRP. So
there's two other places reach out to. I'd ask you to reach out to within UNL is the Center for Ag Profitability. I think we really need to kind of step up our engagement with them, and here's why. Is adjusted for inflation today, it's now approaching the 1980s on what's occurring in row crop agriculture in Nebraska. Adjusted for inflation. It's gnarly out there. And so, adoption of some of these practices and the money that's available it's going to play a pretty significant role if we're in the right place at the right time, but it's not good at all in terms of how producers are going to stay viable. So what's the first thing that goes? This kind of stuff. It rolls it back to where we're only going to do the absolute minimum. And so I think expanding our horizons in terms of who we engage and talk about ROI or some type of integration of that financial aspect, I think is core critical. And I think we ignore it a lot.
We can talk about this all day. Rob, unless you want me to, I can go further, but.
Any additional questions for
There's one more hand raised online. Laura Johnson.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I just wanted to chime in on Lasagna's question. So Laura Johnson, Drinking Water Groundwater Division Administrator for the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. So she had mentioned PFAS and the lack of testing and communication and all of this other stuff. So I just wanted to first say that EPA and the state have been sampling for PFAS since 2016, actually 2013. So between 2013 and 2016, EPA did their first round of sampling large public water systems. That information determined their draft drinking water regulation. So we began as a state in 2017 doing a PFAS inventory of all industries, potential locations where it might be found. So airports, military installations, manufacturing facilities. We tested groundwater, soil, surface water, and we're comparing all of this information to essentially either baseline water quality criteria or draft MCLs at the time. Now we have finalized MCLs, but there is no current screening criteria for sediment. So we're gathering this data, and where we're finding it, we're trying to do more investigations to figure out why. If we found it in an area next to like an installation or an airport, we then expanded our assessment to look at individual private groundwater wells to see if we can find it in there. We've since sampled between us and EPA every public water system. They're either eligible for EPA's funding under the unregulated contaminant monitoring rule. If they were not eligible for free sampling under that, the state took it upon themselves to allocate $2 million to sample all of our public water systems. We're currently still gathering data because the rule requires 2 samples. And we do have a list of systems that we're finding PFAS for, and we're beginning to work with them to fund solutions. The other comment related to biosludge. In Nebraska, that is a federal program run by EPA. We've had conversations with EPA about closing the loop, but that is not a state program for biosludge coming from PTOWs. So I hope that answers some questions. We just got a new website. We're working on a PFAS page. So hopefully when we're done gathering data and we're crunching this and developing reports, we'll be able to get those up on the website and available for all of you guys to look at. So I hope that answers some of your questions. I didn't want you to feel like the state of Nebraska is doing nothing because we're doing quite a lot. Thank you.
Any other questions for me? I might tell Colin to put 6 hours on the agenda when we meet. Yeah. All right. Back to you, John. That's it.
Thanks, Carlos. So, yeah, just to reiterate the importance of our subcommittees for the state tech committees. They play a valuable role to be able to meet, get in the weeds a little bit, and then bring it up, share it back to the bigger state tech committee meetings. So appreciate the work for the subcommittees. Just to circle back with our previous topic there, the wetland offsite methods. So the plan is we presented it was presented leadership, we presented to state tech committee, and we're moving forward with the next steps. So just wanted to let everyone know that's kind of the next steps with our state offsite methods. So wanted to just close the loop on that topic. Corey,
I just wanted to add real quick. So the next step right now is going through the Federal Register. We're waiting for that to come back. Hopefully any day now. See, But in the meantime, we are gonna start using it on an interim basis.
Yeah, so it's gonna be posted to the federal registry where there's a comment period, is that right, Corey?
Yes.
So there's gonna be a comment period, so once that does go live, we'll send out to the state tech committee's distribution list to let everyone know that it's out there, and if there's, provide comments if you so choose, but thanks for reminding of that stuff. All right, while all our partners have are thinking of things to share out, I'm gonna go to our website here because I want to share out where our local work group. I mentioned at the very beginning of the meeting that our local work group meetings have been set, and so I just want to put that out there on just to share that out with everyone. But while I'm doing that, any partners have any updates that you all would like to share out? This is a great opportunity to share to the committee all the different things that's going on in your organization. So now's the time to do that. We have any? Yeah.
Well, we just might have mentioned in our Producer Connect Monthly 103 projects that is launched now. And that's a producer app that will help producers manage their nitrogen sources and also underwater quantity management. 17 NRDs involved in this project. This will get implemented in areas where there's metering, mandatory metering for NRD rules, and then also in the phase 2, phase 3 areas for nitrogen. So that's 17 NRDs, several other the other NRDs. There's one more thinking about joining in. The rest of the NRDs develop their own app. The Corn Board, Corteva, Nebraska Co-op Council, Central Valley Ag, they were the business partners and helped us develop this app. And then we also had partners from NRCS, DNR. The other thing, it's right around the corner. The legislature goes back in business January 8th. It'll be interesting. You got 17 new senators there. Their big task is going to be to address that $432 million shortfall in the next biennium. So there's going to be some pressure on cutting funds. They're also going to be looking at school finances. Related to ag and natural resources, what I'm hearing, there's some discussion of merging DNR and DE. I don't know how that's going to go yet. I've talked to some state senators. They're not too thrilled about merging the agencies or the state of merging the agency. If there's some synergies that can be created, they might consider it. So we'll probably hear some discussion on that. Also, I've been working with the governor's office on water quality, water quantity management and issues. He's looking at developing a task force of ag producers, water users, other interested parties. Just have a task force to review all the management activities we got going on in the state. See if there's any improvements that we can make with different programs. And that, if he undertakes that, that'll probably be a 12 to 18 month process. Wanted to share those things.
Appreciate that, Dean, and also a plug for your legislative conference coming up at the end of January.
Yeah, our legislative conference is the 28th, 29th at the end of January at the Embassy Suites. And our Washington DC trip is March 31 through April 2nd.
Rob, could you give us a little update on the written agreement with the other states with TAPS and Master Irrigator?
Yeah, absolutely. I don't know if Crystal Powers happens to be online.
Oh, I guess I didn't see if she was or not.
Yeah, I don't know. Julie or anyone that is Crystal Powers on?
Yep.
Crystal,
Yeah, I'm online.
Because I know you have the very latest compared to where I'm at. So thank you.
Well, I can give an update on what we're doing in Nebraska, and then maybe you can fill in on the multi-state agreement. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, that sounds fair.
So in Nebraska, we're all set to host, I'm calling them design summits. So in 5 different locations across the state, Scottsbluff, North Platte, Central City, O'Neill, and Beatrice in mid-February through the first week of March. We're going to get together groups of mostly producers, but then we've got several of the NRD managers, and been working with Connor on getting the district cons from NRCS and then private industry partners all together to talk, what do we want master irrigator to look like in Nebraska? So we've come up, the planning group kind of came up with 4 theme areas that we're going to kind of show some previews around. The one which is obvious from the title is irrigation. The second big one is nitrogen management in irrigated systems. Then we're going to talk about policies and current events. So we're going to have a panel with NRD, NRCS, and some other state agency, just kind of depends on the location, who's all going to be on that panel. And then the last piece is on farmer leadership. And I don't know, we kind of have that last one as a catch-all for what else is really critical in like data management in these systems, or any kind of leaving that wide open for what else do they want to see. So the idea is we'll preview a short piece and then have a discussion around each of those themes, so that for next year, when we launch the full multi-day program, it's really driven by what growers want to see, what they're really interested in. And we're going to have a vendor, private industry vendors at these as well. So we're set, we're off and running. I've got the promotional materials together. If you'd like to attend and you haven't heard from me, or if you want to be on a panel, please do reach out. I'm trying to get it out in front of as many people as possible, but I know I don't have everybody in this group. So if that's something that's of interest to you, glad to have you join us. We're looking forward to getting the program launched. So that's a part of a technical agreement that's Nebraska and several other states. So I'll turn it back to Rob if you want to give us, if you've got some updates on the multi-state part of the agreement.
Yeah, thanks, Crystal. So as far as we continue on with our, each state is setting up their own format and how they want it to look in each state. But yeah, Colorado's the lead for us, but we've included Kansas and Oklahoma and Texas, if I'm not mistaken. Crystal, is that?
That's correct.
Yep.
That's right, Bob.
Yep.
That's right.
So yeah, I think that, we're looking, I know Point Evans State Conservationist of Colorado is working closely with CSU to work with budget and all that to see where we can go about adding additional funding likely happening or taking place. But as far as you all hosted the group earlier this summer, a great event, and we're just kind of keep the momentum going.
It's up to 10 states now, involvement with the TAPS project being the centerpiece of that. But I just met today, earlier today, and it's now in 10 states. So it's really interesting and really evolving. And now what do you do with the data? What kind of informative processes we can look at nutrient management from a really research-driven, very controlled process through TAPS, Testing Ag Performance Solutions. So it's good stuff, and where we're headed next steps.
Thanks for bringing that up for our committee. Crystal, any other additional items on your end? I know that you had your hand up.
Yep, I did have a few others I wanted to share, and since I know a lot of you are there in person, if you're interested in them, feel free to reach out and I'll get you more details. And for those online, I'll try to put some links in. But one thing I wanted to share, the agronomy department led by Richard Ferguson has updated UNL's nitrogen recommendations on irrigated corn. And so that is moving to being a responsive in-season management rather than the equation that we've used before. So I think that'll probably take some discussion, particularly with NRCS on how we want to work that out, since I know NRCS uses UNL recommendations, but that is officially updated NEB guide as of last week. And so, and we had a training for all of our extension educators. So we know not, it's not going to be an instant shift over to all of a sudden everyone doing in-season fertigation, but that is where we've moved our recommendations to. So questions on that piece before the others are kind of some events I just wanted to share.
Crystal, is it only fertigation?
No, sorry, that was me misspeaking.
Okay.
Fertigation is one way, but just in season.
Just per application.
Management.
Yeah, it's per application.
Right. So you could do it with, you could do it with a high boy or other sort of application technologies, but using sensors or satellite imagery to let the crop tell you how much nitrogen it needs, not try to guess how much nitrogen it needs. So it's actually a fairly fundamental shift in that recommendation, because before, the equation was a preseason estimate, and soil tests are the same. You do a preseason estimate based on what's in the soil. So this is a fundamental shift to letting the crop tell you how much nitrogen it needs and responding to it in season with very minimal preseason application and no fall fertilizer application being the recommendation. So I can attempt to answer questions, but Richard Ferguson and Javed Iqbal are the lead authors on that. They could answer the technical pieces of that, but I think it might be worth setting up some more detailed discussions between NRCS and UNL coming up. So just some other events I wanted to share. TAPS related to that. The TAPS banquet is coming up in, I should have all these dates written out, but I didn't get them all written out, but in January, I think here. So if you're interested in, somebody else in the room probably has that date.
Yeah, I think January 25th, if I'm not mistaken.
Thank you. But I can, like I said, if for any of these, if you want specifics, I'll try to get them in the chat or people can reach out. But if you want to learn more about TAPS, that's a great way to see they do their end of the season summary. So that's a great opportunity to see that. We also have 2 soil health conferences coming up, one in Hastings and one in West Point in January and February. The annual Soils School, which is a 2-day in-depth on fertility management mostly, is coming up. And then the last one I wanted to share was the Water Center's water tour this year. If you want to get a break from the cold or the legislative session, the first week of February, we're headed to Phoenix and Yuma. So you can get more information on attending that tour if you're interested. Thanks.
Thanks, Crystal. Any questions for Crystal here? I know I need to step off for a call at the top of the hour, so my apologies if I leave abruptly. Just wanted to let everyone know that. So while just real quickly here, I'm sharing the Nebraska NRCS website, and sorry for the fast scrolling. I'm going to go to your homes. All of these. Go down to the State Technical Committee, and we can learn more about the State Technical Committee, but also there's the talks about the local work groups, and there's a fact sheet, but more importantly is the 2025 local work group meeting schedule date. So all the NRD by NRD, the date, the time, the place. So please check that out. I encourage participation for the local work groups that's going to be taking place here in early next year. So wanted to share that. With that, John, if you don't mind finishing us out, facilitating, I need to hop on a call.
Quick question. IWM, I see the integrated water management. There's a pretty significant update in that. I forget the number of it, but we don't have to talk about it today, but there's some certain requirements that looks like that have been redlined into that as part of that irrigated water management strategy. So
Wondering for what, help me out with,
it basically goes to a requirement of a propeller meter as part of the practice. So that was added over to the side, and there's a comment period on it right now.
So maybe for the national practice standard, there's a review for those, if that's taking place right now. I
didn't know the difference, so I'm just.
Okay, yeah, I wasn't aware of that taking place, but, John, I know Corey or Alan's not probably with us, but John or Carlos, can you get the specifics on where you were looking at on that? So I can track that down.
And my concern is the cost of that requirement is gonna really prohibit I think people getting involved in any type of innovative and strategies in terms of how we can move into the 21st century with measuring or looking at withdrawals or stream flows or anything like that. So anyway.
No, that's good to know. And I want us to follow up to find out specifically, make sure we're on the same page of where you're looking.
Well, there's not that many providers. I mean, you're basically narrowing it down to, there's only one provider of a propeller meter.
For that, let's track that down. I want to make sure we're on the same page of what you're looking at versus what we.
Yep, I do too.
Thank you all. I appreciate it. Happy holidays, and we'll, I don't know, but I think maybe there's a few more folks that have some closing thoughts here in the final couple minutes.
Okay, so yeah, well, we'll open it up again online. Anyone have some comments for your organization?
Under roaming.
Katie, go ahead.
Hey everyone, this is Katie Hickel with the Nebraska Department of Environment and Energy. I'm representing our water planning section. I have a couple staff updates for you all. So for those of you that know Tara Anderson, our water quality standards coordinator, she will be taking another position here, I believe it's January 3rd, over at Department of Transportation. So if you have the time, please shoot her an email. Thank her for all her hard work. Wish her some good luck. We're sad to see her go, but we're happy that she's got some great opportunities headed her way. I also did want to share some good news that we are gearing up to start our interviews with our water quality coordinator, which we host jointly with UNL. So those interviews will be taking place, I believe, end of January. That's all in terms of our staffing updates. I guess I wanted to let you all know that come 2025, the Section 319 program will be gearing up to start the rewrite of our state management plan. So this is a very, sorry, go ahead, Laura. Did you have a question?
No, I was getting in the queue for updates. Sorry.
Oh, you're good. You're good. Okay. Yeah. So keep an eye out on inboxes. We will likely be taking external partner feedback as we develop that plan. And lastly, I had an update for the water quality subcommittee that I co-chair with Mr. Rourke Paulman. Since we do have the tentative dates for the 2025 state tech events, we will be looking to schedule around 4 subcommittee meetings throughout the year, ideally roughly a month before each of those state tech meetings. Ideally, we will send out a calendar invite containing all of the invites at once, so you should be able to just put it on your calendar and have the agendas and the dates for all of 2025. But Rourke and I will be working closely with our NRCS representatives to make sure we get that to you. That is all.
Okay, thank you, Katie. Go ahead and move over to Laura. Go ahead, Laura.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting. We also have a new source water protection coordinator, Sean Cruz, who's on the call listening in today and will take over for groundwater updates at the next state tech meeting. But I'm going to cover those real quick. So we have a water well standards contractors and licensing board for groundwater. And they are looking at updates for the water well construction standards. We formed a subcommittee. We've drafted updates. So we have draft changes for that. And then we also have updated our licensing fees for all of our different types of well drillers, pump installers, groundwater monitoring techs. So that again will be in the same packet when we start to do official outreach and get public input on those changes to the title. So groundwater updates are short and sweet. I'll just touch on very briefly that for the drinking water program, in addition to PFAS, which is the hot button issue, there are 2 new lead rules. The lead and copper rule revision is in place. However, the state did not take primacy of it. So we are jointly implementing that rule with EPA. So they have official primacy and are doing enforcement for that rule. There's also the lead and copper rule improvements coming down that the state will take primacy over eventually, and that requires all the lead lines to be removed within 10 years. And then we've got changes to our consumer confidence reporting, essentially doing mandatory conversions for non-English speakers so that they're aware of what's coming to them through their faucets, and requiring large systems to do this public report to consumers twice a year. So if you guys don't have any questions, that is it for me. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Is there anyone else?
Yeah, this is Mark Broman, the director of Wichiska Audubon, and I just wanted to let everyone know we closed today on Prairie Pines. That was Walt Bagley's experimental and research property on 112th and Adams in Lincoln. It's 145 acres that has about 10 acres of native prairie, about 30 acres of restored prairie, some forested area, community crops. But if anyone's interested in continuing to do research out there, we've had a lot of research over the years. The University of Nebraska Foundation has owned it since the early 90s, but we took possession today. So our offices will be moving out there. But if you're interested in doing any types of soils or shelter belt work or something like that, or native prairie research, let us know.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Anyone else? I don't see any hands up. Anybody in this room? Yes, go ahead, Sean.
Yeah, I was just gonna give an update that we are once again taking applications for our, well, I guess I should say, I'm Shelley Kelly with the Hills Task Force. And we're taking applications for our ranch internship program. I've got some flyers if you know of anybody that might be interested. There's no upper age limit. There's just an age limit. They have to be over 19 years of age. So it's not just for students or college students. It's for anybody that would like to go work on a ranch in the Sandhills for 3 months. We'll take applications now through January 15th. We've got the application on our website at sandhillstaskforce.org. And you can also go see a great description of the host families that are willing to host these interns. 2024 was a great year. We had 11 interns we got to place on ranches in the Sandhills, and they had a great experience. So that's a fun program coming out. We've got ranch profitability workshops coming up in January. On January 7th, Bert Tigert is coming to talk. He always does a great job of talking about stewardship and finances and everything that goes into ranching. So January 7th will be held in Gordon, and January 8th will be held in Burwell. So I know that's a long ways from here, but you guys might know some people that would like to go and learn about ranch profitability. And then I also just wanted to give a plug for the Nebraska Grassland Vision event that's going to be held January 16th in Broken Bow. It is an invite-only event, trying to build out this vision for all organizations for grasslands. It's in Broken Bow. If you were invited, I just want to give you another shove or a push to make sure you try to attend that event. It's going to be very important to have diverse partners at that meeting. That's all that I've got.
Okay, thank you, Shelley. Rourke.
Just real quick, we are going to be in our second year and expand our relationship with Google and with Arable. We have launched a mobile app that looks at and helps inform and support irrigation decisions. It does not make them. But we had a fairly good success with it. Of course, we had bumps and bruises, but we have nearly 200 devices out on machines. We learned some lessons about being on a pivot, but we're going to expand that. Google liked the concept of this AI world of looking at and anticipating irrigation events and possibly including nutrient management going forward. But currently, it's a significant project. I'm in right center in the middle of it. And so the Mark III is basically a very robust weather station, ET, rain event and all that. But we actually put them on the pivots and traveled around the outside of them. But we had some successes and we had some challenges. There's no doubt. But ultimately, it is a very intriguing process to look at it. But that much weather data is what really kind of blew up the whole thing. Is the idea we have cover crops that were post-planted, mid-season planted, pre-planted, working with UNL. So we're looking at the ET rates in real time inside of those fields because we're in allocated basins. So we got to answer or ask the right questions around how much water does it actually take to support not only the cash crop, but also these cover crops. But then the app to be able to support in a red, green, yellow, blue, which blue is overwatering, so to speak, and then very tailorable to a regional bias in terms of the differences in rainfall in Scotts Bluff or North Platte or in eastern Nebraska. So more yet to come on that, but we're really excited about what that can bring in terms of opportunities for managing and being a steward of our resources.
Okay, thank you, Rourke. Anyone else from the room? Okay, I don't see any hands up, no other hands from people online. So I think with that, we're going to conclude this meeting. Thank you all for coming and showing up and providing information. Wish you all Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays.